She held the teddy bear close to her chest as if it were all she had, and maybe it really was. "This teddy bear will take care of you while I'm not here," Emily whispered, her voice trembling as the sick girl's eyes sparkled for the first time in days. But what Emily didn't know was that this simple gesture would be seen by someone who could change her life forever. A story about compassion, sacrifice, and a fate no one saw coming. Love heartwarming stories? Then hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and comment, what would you do if you were in her place? Hospitals don't sleep, neither did Emily. With a coffee-stained uniform and her hair pulled back into a loose bun, she moved through the cold, fluorescent hallways like a shadow, unnoticed but vital. Her shifts were long, her pay painfully short, and the little stuffed bear she carried in her bag was the only piece of warmth she had left from a childhood that ended far too soon. She lived in a cramped apartment on the edge of the city. Leaky faucet, flickering lights, no pictures on the walls, her fridge echoed emptiness, bills stacked like a deck of regrets. Still, every morning she rose with quiet strength. She didn't have much, but she had a purpose, to comfort the forgotten, to hold the hands no one else would hold. Lily had become one of those forgotten ones. A fragile 6-year-old girl, with eyes too big for her face and skin pale like paper. She was new in the oncology ward, wrapped in a faded blanket that barely kept the cold out. Her silence wasn't stubborn, it was scared. Machines beeped beside her, but she stared past them, searching for something familiar in an unfamiliar world. Emily noticed, not because it was her job, but because she remembered what fear tasted like. She saw herself in that little girl, alone, small, unsure if anyone cared, and maybe that's why, when Lily reached for the bear tucked in Emily's bag, she didn't hesitate. She gently placed it in the girl's arms without a second thought. Meanwhile, across town, James Thompson sat in a glass tower that scraped the sky. CEO of a tech empire. His office overlooked the city he practically owned, but his life felt hollow. His suits were tailored, his watch worth more than Emily made in a year. But his heart? That was locked somewhere deep beneath years of ambition and grief. He hadn't visited Lily in 3 weeks, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to care. Her illness terrified him, reminded him too much of what he'd already lost. So he buried himself in contracts, board meetings, and numbers that felt safer than people, especially little girls with sad eyes. 2 people, 2 worlds, one running toward pain to help, the other running from it to survive. What they didn't know was that fate had already drawn a line between them, a line neither of them had noticed, but one that would change everything the moment it was crossed. That moment was coming. And it would start with a bear and a broken routine. Emily didn't grow up with fairy tales. She grew up with late notices, empty plates, and a mother who worked 3 jobs and still went to bed crying. Her childhood was a collection of quiet sacrifices and forgotten birthdays. By the time she was 12, she knew how to cook dinner, hide bruises, and lie with a smile. She became a nurse, not out of ambition, but necessity. It was the only career that blended what she knew best, surviving and taking care of people who were also hanging on by a thread. Every patient she helped felt like saving a version of herself. She gave comfort not through words, but through presence, the kind that says, "I see you even when the world doesn't." Her hands bore the proof of her journey, calloused from years of labor, but gentle when they touched a child's forehead. She wore sneakers with worn soles and always carried mints in her pocket, offering them to co-workers and kids like tiny pieces of kindness. That bear? It was the last gift her mother gave her before vanishing from her life. Emily never let it go, until Lily. She had no family left, no one to ask how her day was. Her apartment was silent, her meals reheated, but she filled her days with purpose. She remembered every patient's name, every allergy. Every bedtime story a sick kid needed to hear again. Emily wasn't extraordinary, but in a world full of noise, she listened. And in a world obsessed with more, she gave what little she had. Lily didn't say much when they met, but there was a silent understanding between them, a girl too young to carry pain and a woman too young to feel so old. Emily sat by her bed during breaks, humming softly or showing her how to fold paper into stars. No expectations, just presence. And in those stolen moments, something began to shift. Emily felt a tug she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, as if her life for the first time wasn't just orbiting other people's needs, but mattering to someone who saw her too. She didn't know James existed, didn't know her name would soon pass his lips. But deep down, Emily felt something was about to change. The air felt different, like the calm right before a thunderstorm. And thunder always starts with a whisper. The hospital lights dimmed at night, but Emily's mind never did. When her shift ended, she dragged her tired body through the freezing wind, clutching her jacket closed with one hand and her empty lunchbox with the other. Her neighborhood was quiet, but not peaceful, more like forgotten. Her building smelled of old paint and resignation. Inside, a single bulb flickered in her hallway like a warning sign no one ever fixed. Her apartment was barely more than a room, cluttered with second-hand furniture and thrift store memories. The heater worked only when it wanted to, and the silence was so loud it sometimes made her cry without knowing why. She often skipped dinner to make groceries stretch through the week, and yet somehow she always had a snack hidden away in her bag for a sick kid. Each bill on the counter was a slap from reality: electricity, rent, medical school loans she'd never be able to pay off. Her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse specialist had been shelved right next to the dusty books she once studied with. now stacked beside a cracked mirror. Still, every morning, she pressed her name badge to her chest like armor and walked back into the chaos with a smile. Meanwhile, Lily's battle was quieter, but no less brutal. Her small body grew weaker. The treatments drained her, and her hair had begun to fall in soft, silent clumps. She asked few questions, not because she didn't wonder, but because she'd learned not to expect answers. She missed the sound of lullabies, missed her father's voice, even if she barely remembered what it sounded like. And James. He was winning on every front, except the ones that truly mattered. His face graced magazine covers. His voice filled boardrooms. But when he entered his penthouse, the echo of his own footsteps felt like a rebuke. He told himself he was doing it all for Lily, but deep down, he knew he was hiding behind success because failure as a father scared him more than anything else. He reviewed his assistant's hospital reports, noted Lily's condition, but always found a reason not to visit. Too busy, too complicated, too painful. Excuses wrapped in executive language. He sent gifts, expensive ones, dolls, tablets, even a giant teddy bear she never touched. But what Lily needed couldn't be shipped. It had to be felt, and James hadn't felt anything real in years, so they all endured, separate storms under the same sky. Emily fought to survive, Lily fought to stay alive, and James, he fought himself, his guilt, his grief, and the quiet, aching truth that maybe he didn't know how to love anymore, but love has a funny way of creeping in, even through broken ceilings and closed hearts. And soon, all three of them would be standing in the eye of a storm none of them saw coming. Emily didn't plan it. She wasn't trying to be a hero or even noticed. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon, rain hitting the windows, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when she saw Lily sitting alone in her hospital bed, clinging to the frayed edge of her blanket. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her lips trembling from something deeper than fear. It was loneliness. The girl had just come out of a difficult procedure. Nurses passed by, busy with charts and routines, but none of them stopped. Emily hesitated at the door, her heart squeezing tight. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out her most treasured possession, a worn little bear with a crooked ear, and walked in without saying a word. She sat beside Lily, gently placing the bear in her lap. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. "He's been with me for a long time, but I think maybe he wants to be with you now." Lily looked up, her lip quivering. Then slowly she wrapped her tiny arms around the bear and whispered, "Thank you." That moment cracked something open. Emily didn't realize she was crying until a tear landed on her scrubs. But it wasn't sadness, it was release, a quiet unraveling of years of holding herself together. Lily's grip on the bear was like an anchor. It was the first time in a long while that Emily felt needed not just professionally, but deeply, personally. Across town, James's assistant interrupted his meeting. "Sir," she said carefully, "I think you should see this." She handed him a tablet showing a grainy hospital security clip of Emily handing the bear to Lily. No sound, just that one simple human moment. James stared at the screen, blinked once, then again. He didn't say anything for a long time. His colleagues waited for him to return to the agenda, but his mind had gone somewhere else, somewhere fragile. He saw something in Emily's face that shook him. Not pity, not duty, love. The kind he didn't remember how to give. Later that night, he watched the video again, this time alone, in the darkness of his penthouse. It haunted him, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so achingly gentle. That nurse had given her last comfort to his daughter without knowing who she was or who he was. No press, no reward, just heart. James wasn't used to feeling small, but that night he did. In a way that made him remember what it felt like to hold Lily as a baby. What it felt like to sing to her once, years ago, before he started measuring his time in quarterly reports instead of bedtime stories. And for the first time in a long while, James Thompson felt something other than guilt. He felt curiosity. Who was this nurse? And why did her gesture hit him harder than any business deal he'd ever closed? Whatever the reason, something had shifted, and James didn't know it yet, but his world was about to tilt on its axis. The next day, Emily peeked into Lily's room between rounds. She didn't expect anything, just wanted to check in, but what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Lily was smiling. It wasn't big or loud, just a soft, sleepy curve of the lips. Mr. Buttons was tucked under her chin, and for the first time her eyes looked less afraid. Emily stepped in slowly. "Hey there," she whispered, unsure if she was interrupting something sacred. Lily opened her eyes and nodded, as if she'd been waiting. "He likes it here," she said, patting the bear's head. Emily smiled back, pulling up a chair. "I'm glad. He was getting bored in my bag." Their visits became a quiet routine. Emily would sit by the bed during breaks, telling stories or folding origami animals from scrap paper. Lily would listen with wide eyes, sometimes drifting to sleep mid-sentence, always holding Mr. Buttons close. There were no grand gestures, just consistency, presence, and those Lily had never known. Other nurses began to notice the change. "That kid hasn't smiled in weeks," one of them murmured. "What did you do?" Emily shrugged, brushing it off. But inside, a warmth was growing. It wasn't about credit. It was about meaning. She was making a dent in someone's darkness, and that felt right. Meanwhile, James was watching. At first, from reports. Then, from a distance. He started making unannounced visits to the hospital, not to see Lily directly, but to walk past her room. To glance through the glass and watch Emily reading or drawing or just sitting in silence while his daughter slept. He didn't approach. He didn't know how. He wasn't ready to explain why he'd been absent, or why a stranger's kindness pierced deeper than any guilt he'd carried. But something about Emily, her stillness, her gentleness, stayed with him. She didn't try to impress anyone. She simply cared. One afternoon he caught her humming a lullaby, her hand resting lightly on Lily's blanket. The scene felt so intimate, James had to turn away, not out of disrespect, but out of shame. That should have been him. That should have been his voice, Lily knew. But it wasn't, and somehow this nurse, this stranger, was filling the space he'd left behind. He began asking questions quietly. "Who is she?" he asked a staff member. "How long has she worked here?" The answers were simple. 5 years, no family, always took the worst shifts, always gave more than she had, no complaints, just kindness. For the first time, James felt something stir beyond guilt or admiration. It was a pull, not romantic, not yet, but human. Like a tether between their worlds had been tied without either of them noticing, and it was tightening. Emily didn't know he was watching, didn't know that her quiet love had begun unraveling something deeply locked inside a man who'd forgotten what real love looked like. But the heart always knows, before the mind does. And soon, neither of them would be able to ignore what was forming between them. It started with a cough, just a small, dry sound. Emily noticed it right away. Lily's lips were pale, her forehead warm. She alerted the doctors immediately, and within hours, the entire energy in the ward shifted. Test results came back quickly, and they weren't good. Lily's condition had turned critical, fast. Emily stayed by her side, gripping her hand gently as the machines beeped faster, the oxygen levels dropping. Doctors moved around her like a storm, but she remained still, whispering calm into the chaos. "You're not alone, sweetheart. I'm right here. Mr. Buttons is here too." She placed the bear back in Lily's arms as tears welled in her eyes. Across the city, James was in a meeting when his phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the hospital. The fourth came with a trembling voice on the other end. "Sir, it's Lily. You should come now." For the first time in years, he didn't ask for details. He didn't finish the meeting. He just ran. Out of the boardroom into his car, and through red lights, with panic in his throat. He arrived breathless, ignoring security and nurses calling his name. When he reached Lily's room, he froze. Through the glass, he saw her, tiny, pale, motionless, hooked up to more wires than he could count. And beside her was Emily, holding her hand. Her eyes closed in silent prayer, her head bowed like she was breaking inside, but refused to leave. James pushed the door open and entered quietly. Emily looked up, startled. Their eyes met for the first time, not through glass, not from a distance, but in raw, shared fear. He spoke before he could think. "How long has she been like this?" His voice cracked. Emily stood, giving him space. "Since this morning. She's fighting. But it's getting harder." For a moment they stood there, strangers bound by a girl they both loved in different ways. James sat beside his daughter and reached for her hand, guilt washing over him in waves. "I should have been here," he whispered. Emily didn't say a word, but her silence wasn't judgmental. It was understanding, and somehow that was worse. The doctors came in with updates, vague, clinical, uncertain. Emily listened, heart racing, while James's hands trembled in his lap. When they left, the room fell quiet again, until James finally broke. "You gave her that bear," he said softly. "I saw it. I didn't understand why. But now I do." Emily looked down, her voice barely audible. She needed something that felt safe. "And I I needed to feel like I could still make a difference. There was no pity in her words, just truth. And James, for once, didn't run from it. They stayed there for hours, side by side, breathing the same fear, sharing the same hope. And as the night deepened, so did the bond between them, two broken hearts beating for the same fragile life. Emily didn't sleep that night. She refused to leave Lily's side. The doctors had stabilized her, but the battle was far from over. The infection had weakened her already fragile immune system, and the next 48 hours would be critical. Emily stayed in the corner chair, her hands clasped, whispering words that sounded like prayers, but were really promises. James stayed too. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't try. He sat opposite Emily, his posture stiff, his suit jacket folded over his lap like a shield. But every now and then his gaze drifted to her, not with suspicion, but gratitude. Her presence calmed the storm inside him. Her strength held up what little was left of his. That morning he brought coffee, just 2 paper cups. He handed one to Emily silently, and she took it with a nod. No small talk, no thanks. Just a quiet exchange between two people bound by something bigger than words. They sat in silence, listening to the soft beeping of the monitors and the steady rhythm of Lily's breath. By noon, Lily opened her eyes, just for a second. But it was enough. Emily rushed to her side, tears springing to her eyes. "Hey there, brave girl," she whispered. James stood frozen, his chest tight. When Lily blinked and whispered, "Daddy," he nearly crumbled. He took her hand gently, like it might break. "I'm here, baby," he said, voice shaking. "I'm right here now." The next days were a blur of slow progress and careful optimism. Lily started eating again. Her color returned. The doctors were cautious but hopeful. Emily became part of the routine, not just as a nurse, but as someone Lily asked for when she was scared. And James? He came every day. No more boardrooms, no more excuses. One afternoon, Lily reached for both of their hands at once. She didn't say anything, just squeezed, her eyes fluttering closed with a tiny smile. That moment melted something in James. He looked at Emily, emotion raw in his voice. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," she replied softly. "Just be here." That's all she ever wanted. And for the first time, James realized how badly he needed that too. They began to share stories. Emily told him about her mother. James opened up about losing his wife. Their pain met in the middle like two rivers merging, carrying different sorrows, but flowing toward the same place. They weren't fixed, not yet, but they weren't alone anymore. And sometimes that's all healing needs to begin. The hospital began to feel like a second home. James no longer wore suits when he visited, just jeans and a sweater, hair slightly out of place, but eyes more alive. Emily noticed the change, though she never mentioned it. She, too, was different, less guarded. More at ease. There was a quiet comfort between them now, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. One afternoon, Lily sat up in bed with more energy than she'd had in weeks. "Can Miss Emily come home with us when I get better?" she asked with a bright innocence. Emily chuckled nervously, brushing a curl from Lily's forehead. "I think your daddy might have something to say about that." But Lily turned to James with a hopeful look that hit him straight in the heart. James hesitated, then looked at Emily. "Actually, I was going to ask you something similar," he said, his voice unsteady. "Would you consider visiting us outside of the hospital?" Emily blinked, caught off guard. "You mean... I think Lily needs you, and maybe I do too." It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was real. An invitation not just into a home, but into a life. Emily didn't answer right away. Her heart raced. She wasn't used to being wanted outside of work. But when she looked at Lily, hugging Mr. Buttons with a smile that could light a city, she felt the answer forming before her lips could shape it. "Yes," she said softly. "I'd like that." The words felt dangerous and safe all at once. Like stepping into something she'd longed for, but didn't believe she deserved. James nodded, exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. A week later, Emily visited their home. It wasn't what she expected. Warm, filled with light, and scattered with the awkward attempts of a man trying to make a space feel like family. Toys still in boxes, books unopened, a kitchen too clean to be used. But it was honest and full of potential. They had dinner together, chicken nuggets and mashed potatoes because Lily picked the menu. They laughed when James burned the first batch. Emily sat beside Lily at the table, cutting her food into tiny bites, while James watched with something between awe and disbelief. He couldn't remember the last time the house had echoed with laughter. That night, before Emily left, James walked her to the door. "I know this is strange," he said quietly, "but you changed everything. For her. For me." Emily shook her head. "All I did was give her a bear." "No," he said, "you gave her hope, and you reminded me how to be a father." As the door closed behind her, Emily leaned against it for a moment, hand on her chest. Something new was beginning. And for the first time in forever, it felt like home was calling. Not everything unfolded like a fairy tale. In the weeks that followed, doubt crept in quietly. Emily began to feel like an outsider, no longer just a nurse, but not yet someone who belonged. Invitations to dinner became more frequent, and so did the stares from people in James's circle. Emily didn't come from wealth. She didn't dress the part, speak the language, or fit the mold. One evening, James invited her to a small charity gala. "Just dinner. You don't even have to stay long," he said gently. Emily hesitated. Her only dress was years old, and she hadn't worn heels since nursing school, but Lily begged with sparkling eyes, so she said yes. That night she stepped into the room like she was walking into a different world, and she felt it immediately. The whispers, the judgment, the polite, practiced smiles. A woman in pearls leaned in close at the table. "So, you're the nurse?" Her voice was sweet but laced with something sharp. Emily nodded, managing a smile. "Yes." The woman's smile widened. "How noble." James noticed. He reached for Emily's hand beneath the table, but she'd already pulled it back. Her posture stiffened. The warmth from earlier vanished. That night, in the car ride home, Emily stayed silent. James tried to lighten the mood, but she stared out the window, arms crossed. Finally she spoke. I don't belong in your world, James. And that's okay, but I'm not sure how to keep pretending I do. His jaw clenched. You're not pretending. You belong with us, me and Lily. Her eyes glistened. Do I? Or am I just convenient right now, until you realize what everyone else already sees? The car pulled up to her building, and she opened the door before he could answer. Thank you for tonight, she whispered. But maybe it's best if I keep some distance. James didn't sleep that night. The next day, he showed up at the hospital, not in a suit, not with flowers, but with a question. Do you really think I care what they think? Emily, I built a kingdom and still felt empty. You walked into a hospital room and gave my daughter everything she was missing. I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it. But Emily shook her head, heart pounding. And I don't want to be someone you need to rescue. I've spent my whole life saving myself. I just wanted to be chosen for who I am. Not because of what I gave you. James paused, then stepped closer. Then choose me back, because I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to stay. Their silence was heavy, the kind that holds something sacred, and in that moment, the only thing louder than fear was hope. Emily didn't answer James right away. She needed space, to think, to breathe, to remember who she was before all of this. But even in that distance, something had shifted. Her apartment didn't feel like it used to. It felt smaller, quieter, less like home. She missed Lily's laugh, missed James's awkward attempts at cooking, and most of all, she missed the feeling of being seen. She returned to work with her usual grace, but her co-workers noticed something different, softer, lighter. You smile more, one nurse whispered during a break. Emily shrugged, brushing it off. But it was true. Something in her heart had cracked open, not broken, opened, and she wasn't the only one. James began showing up at the hospital again, not just to visit Lily, but to talk, not with flowers or grand gestures, but with presence. He brought lunch to Emily on her breaks, asked about her favorite books, listened more than he spoke. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was learning who she was, piece by piece. Lily, meanwhile, blossomed. Her cheeks regained color, her laughter filled the halls, and her bond with Emily deepened. She insisted Emily braid her hair, pick her bedtime stories, and sit by her side during treatments. To her, Emily wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was something steady, something sacred. One Saturday, James invited Emily and Lily to the park. Simple, no pressure, just sunshine, sandwiches, and space to breathe. Emily hesitated, then agreed. Watching Lily run through the grass with Mr. Buttons tucked under her arm, Emily felt a kind of peace she hadn't known since childhood. And when James sat beside her on the bench and quietly said, "I want this to be normal," she believed him. That afternoon, Lily drew a picture, 3 stick figures under a crooked sun. One tall, one small, one in the middle, holding hands with both. "This is my family," she said proudly. Emily blinked back tears. "That's beautiful," she whispered, tracing the lines with her finger. Over the next few weeks, Emily slowly allowed herself to imagine a future. Not one of fairy tales, but one of morning routines, school lunches and Sunday puzzles on the couch. A life built not on grand gestures, but small, faithful love. And James, he changed too. He stepped away from board meetings to be at recitals, started leaving his phone behind at dinner, and let himself be silly again. They weren't perfect. There were still hard conversations, moments of insecurity. But they faced them together, with honesty, with grace, and with the kind of courage that only comes from surviving what almost broke you. And in that gentle, persistent growth, they became something stronger than either of them imagined. A family. It was a quiet morning, the kind where birds sang softly and the wind barely moved the curtains. Emily stood by the kitchen window of James's house. No, their house now, watching Lily chase Bubbles across the backyard in her pajamas. Mr. Buttons, though older and even more worn, still sat proudly in her arms. The once silent home now echoed with life. Paintings on the fridge, shoes scattered at the door, half-finished puzzles on the coffee table. Emily felt it in her chest, the ache of joy so big it almost hurt. She had given everything for others her whole life, and somehow it had all come back to her, multiplied in ways she never imagined. James entered the kitchen with a cup of coffee, his sleeves rolled up and a sleepy smile on his face. "She woke me up at 6, he said, nodding toward Lily. "Said we had to chase happiness before it flies away." Emily laughed. "Sounds like something I'd say." He leaned against the counter, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. Later that day, Lily placed Mr. Buttons on a shelf in her room, gently, like setting down a sacred memory. "He doesn't have to protect me all the time now," she said. "I have you." Emily hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. That little bear had once been her only friend. Now he was part of a legacy, of healing, of hope. That night, under the soft light of the porch, James turned to Emily. "I used to think power was about control, dominance, fear. But then I met you and realized power is being present, loving fiercely, showing up." Emily took his hand, the silence between them now full of meaning. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she whispered. "But Lily found me, and through her, you did too." They sat in silence, the air warm with peace. Sometimes it's not the world that has to change, it's our understanding of what truly matters. A bear, a child, a nurse who gave her last toy without expecting anything in return, and a man who discovered that the strongest hearts are often the quietest ones. Comment below where you heard this story. I want to know. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that small acts can still change the world. See you in the next video.